Hi everyone. Tonight's video lecture is going to talk about different functions of the media. However, before we get to that, I would like to talk a little bit about how government regulates the various types of media that we talked about in class. Media, especially electronic media, is regulated by the FCC, which is the Federal Communications Commission, and they were set up to help limit monopolies on media corporations and conglomerates so that there would be a multitude of media companies giving us the news. So there cannot be only, two or three, for instance, media firms. We make sure we have a variety of places that are owning the news outlets that we're using to consume that news. They also established that stations must serve the public interest, which means that the media put forth, it has to be for the common good, for people to really learn and have access to information. They also require that when giving time to different candidates, each candidate has an equal amount of time on the airwaves, and that if they have one candidate on, for instance, on a talk show and they have a platform to speak with voters, that they give the same opportunity to the opposing candidate to come on and be able to reply to whatever the candidate had said about them. However, this idea of the fairness doctrine and equal time, a lot of that's been abolished. There isn't as strict of a control or regulation on that. However, media outlets oftentimes do try to do their best, especially ones that are publicly owned, maybe not private media outlets like an MSNBC or a Fox News. Now, I am going to ask that you stop here and watch the crash course video on media regulation. You'll notice that this video is linked on the agenda slide or on Canvas, and you have 4 questions to answer in your note packet as you watch. So again, please stop here and watch the crash course video. All right, so coming back then, we are going to begin to look at functions of the media. And one of the important functions of the media is agenda setting. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most important and significant functions of the media because they control the political agenda. We know things are happening because we watch or consume the news. So the media helps frame our understanding of the most important issues and things that we're dealing with at any given time. So we establish and set our priorities because of what the media has told us to be important. They draw our attention to certain issues. Or, just as important perhaps, is the things that they don't draw our attention to. And what the media chooses to cover, how they cover it, and what they leave out can either help promote a president's agenda and the things that they see as important, or hinder it. If they don't give coverage to things a president wants to highlight, citizens may not know that these things are being addressed or how they're being addressed. At the same time, things that are covered and how they're covered can help a president's favorability. The media also plays an important role in creating political forums and opportunities, spaces for candidates to get their message out to the public. So candidates will use the media to make announcements and get support. They will hold media events that are carefully staged and scripted to draw the media there, try to make the news. A lot of times these events are held for the media's benefit so that the message will get out to the people the way that they want. Candidates will use this opportunity for photo ops, shaking hands, kissing babies, cutting ribbons, visiting certain businesses, all for the hopes of those pictures or that footage getting out there to voters so they can see what they're doing on the campaign trail. Candidates will also use the media to hold press conferences and also buy time on different media outlets to run campaign commercials. And generally, campaign ads make up the biggest portion of a campaign budget. About 60% of a presidential campaign budget is used on campaign ads on the airwaves. And usually those commercials are negative. We'll talk more about campaign ads in our elections and campaigns chapter, but most ads, and I think we can see this reflected in what's out there today, are negative attack ads, where rather than kind of positive candidate promotion, they're negative and attack ads of the opponent. Now, successfully using the political forums created through the media is very critical to a candidate's success, especially for presidents, because it's all about the image making. How you're portrayed in the media matters to voters. That's how they see and maybe evaluate you, the candidate, you, the politician, and decide if they're going to vote for you or vote for you again. Relationships with the press, positive relationships, are really important because bad relationship with the media can be ruinous. You want to make sure that there's a positive portrayal of you and that you can kind of control your appearance on media outlets. You want to be in the media, but you want it to be on your terms. So your appearance and your mannerisms absolutely matter. And this became important in the debate between Nixon and JFK in 1960 when you had a debate that was both on the radio and televised. And people who listened to the radio thought that Nixon had won because he was composed and clear in his delivery. But those who watched it on TV, this was the first televised presidential debate, believed that JFK had won because he was polished, he was tan, he'd just been in California campaigning, where Nixon had been sick. He looked cold and clammy and pale, and so people thought he had won. So appearance in the media does matter. And personality. The media will pick up on various personality traits and play to them. Additionally, the role that media can play in political campaigns and the role as a linkage institution influencing electoral outcomes. Advertising, as we mentioned, expensive, right? It is expensive to run ads on media outlets, but it is worth the money. Candidates believe, and that's why they spend so much of their campaign budget on that. But most ads are negative, and a lot of that negative advertising feeds into the cynicism that we, the people, have towards politics. News coverage, though, is free, and so candidates hold news events, those media events that draw the media and make the evening news. They will attend talk shows as a guest, and you want to create the spin. The spin relates to how you frame messaging, how you frame issues, how you frame events or things that have happened. And so it's a technique all about timing, all used to create image. And most campaigns, most politicians have somebody on their staff that's called the spin doctor that helps to influence media interpretation of events so that they are favorable to the candidate. The media also hosts and cover presidential debates and other debates between gubernatorial candidates, candidates for senator, etc. But your style here is key, and they require extensive preparation, and you want to make sure you don't make a mistake because fumbles can hurt you. Candidates also have to prepare for a variety of debate formats depending on the media outlet hosting it. The media also helps to hold candidates accountable. So they do fact checking, they can evaluate claims that candidates make even in real time during a debate, and they report the polls. They keep us up to date on public opinion, favorability towards different policy issues, but also in terms of races between candidates, the who's ahead, who's behind. A lot of times we call that horse race journalism, that we look at an election not as a contest between two people with these extensive policy ideas and promises that they're making, but a numbers game, always analyzing who's ahead, who's behind. It is also the job, of course, then, of the media to report the news, find the news. So where do they find the news to report? They find them via beats. A beat is an ongoing assignment on a topic, so you'll have a journalist who's assigned, for instance, to the White House or to the U.S. Capitol, or covering just the Senate or the Supreme Court. And so news kind of comes out of those places frequently. We also see that the media, they're going to find the unusual, the unexpected. That's what tends to be emphasized over important events. And this can kind of distort our knowledge and understanding of what's going on because the media really want to report what will give them ratings over the informative educational stuff because the unusual, the unexpected, the fluff stuff, that's what draws viewers, and profit and ratings are key. That's really what drives media outlets. Trial balloons, this is the idea that sometimes campaigns will leak something to the press just to kind of gauge public reaction. If it's received positively, they'll run with it. If not, they might back off. And generally speaking, we see that there's a symbiotic relationship between journalists, the media, and politicians. Journalists rely on politicians to give them news. Politicians need journalists to get the stories out there. And the really big, hard-hitting investigative journalism, uncovering those really big stories of corruption or whatever it might be, can be prize-winning. Both the media and politicians need to be careful, though. The government might withhold info that could be seen as censoring, and the media has to respect that there is certain information that is so sensitive that it cannot get out to citizens. Now, oftentimes what is presented in the media is not going to be the full story. We have what's called skimming off the cream because it's too hard to really adequately cover complex policy issues or speeches given by candidates in a 30-minute nightly news broadcast. So what happens is a lot of stories, a lot of what's presented in the news are reduced to short segments or sound bites. And this leads to coverage of the hard-hitting big issues being more superficial, less useful to viewers. And candidates specifically get frustrated because they might give a 20-minute speech, and in the news it's boiled down to a 10 or 8-second even soundbite that doesn't really help viewers understand the whole context of the speech or the message being given. So stations really ignore the complex policy issues. They're devoting less time to political candidates. And so politicians get frustrated that they can't present the issues they really want to. They have to also then maybe find other ways to get that message across, either a cable news network, but there's a smaller audience there. They might also use social media or other methods then due to that trend that we see of news stations like NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox giving less time to the policy pieces and the really important election coverage. It also means, though, that politicians can more easily avoid issues, which they don't mind so much. So this is just a look at what Americans find newsworthy. Why do we avoid the hard-hitting issues? Why do we kind of go for the more extreme? Well, there's a quote in media, "If it bleeds, it leads." And it's the idea that Americans really don't want to hear about the policy issues. They don't want to hear about things like, for instance here, Obamacare or the Supreme Court decision of allowing corporations and unions to pay for ads about political candidates. They don't want to hear about the passage of the Communications Deregulation Bill. That stuff is boring. That's why it's reduced to short little 10-second bits of coverage. But they do want to hear about the things that bleed. If it bleeds, it leads. The tragedies, the disasters, those are the things that pull viewers in, and that's why those types of stories, like the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion, or Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, or the earthquake in Haiti, those are the things that end up having more viewers, what people find to be more newsworthy. So how influential then are the media? Well, in my opinion, incredibly. They have the power of agenda setting. They make the news. They help us evaluate what is important. They get to decide and affect what we think about. How the media portrays politicians could influence their approval rating. The media is very quick to show negative things, which leads to a distrust of politicians. But they help us decide what's important. And with that is a tremendous amount of power. They are the ones that help us understand what's going on in the world. They frame the issues. They decide what will be covered and in what context. They select what and how they report. So this idea of agenda setting is the media's greatest power. So when we think about the media, we need to think about the source, what's being reported and what's not, which issues are covered, what is not, and think about how they're being framed. That's it. Come with questions tomorrow.